All right, let's try this again with the original settings as they were. And I think my dumbass brain has finally figured it out. So test, 1, 2, 3.
Fourth time is a charm, I suppose. Technological difficulty is happening over here on that side of the table.
Oh, on that side of the table? Okay. The lady who just gets to sit there and have fun. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, hello.
Hello.
I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Jeff.
And we are watching Supernatural together and doing a podcast about it. The fun part is that I've seen Supernatural. It's one of my favorite shows. I've seen it several times over, especially the first 5 seasons. And he's never seen it. So it's an interesting experience to go through, but there's a catch. We're not just going to watch 15 seasons of Supernatural. We made a deal. He's going to watch Supernatural with me if I...
Oh, that was for me. She has to watch my favorite show as well, which is Star Trek. So we're going to do a season of Supernatural as a rewatch for you and a react for me. And then we'll flip the script. You get to do first watch, and I get to do a rewatch. But it's a little more interesting because Stephanie also works in the industry. She works in TV and film. I found that it makes TV watching very, very interesting because we watch a show on the weekend, and then she goes and makes a show during the week. So we're going to dig in all those different areas. It's been fun so far.
Yeah.
This is the 3rd season. We're still pretty fresh.
3rd episode.
Oh, I'm sorry, 3rd episode. Yeah, that's what I meant. That's fine. We'll fix it in post.
So we today watched the 3rd episode, Dead in the Water of season 1. The original air date is September 27th, 2005. It is written by Sarah Gamble and Raelle Tucker and directed by Kim Manners. Rest in peace to Kim Manners. He died sometime during the 15 seasons of Supernatural, which was quite sad. And Sarah Gamble, fun fact, ended up becoming the showrunner in later years. Anyway, summary of the episode. Let's go. Sam and Dean investigate a series of mysterious drownings written off as suicides. They discover their spirit is an angry little boy with the power to travel through water who is taking revenge on certain town inhabitants for a dark secret buried long ago. Dean forms a bond with a young boy who seems to have the power of premonition.
Spoilers, by the way.
Well, if you haven't watched it by now, then...
Yeah, that's true. There has to be like an actual statute of limitations when it comes to spoiling TV show.
Yeah, it's been 20 years, guys.
20
well,
years.
September, so not quite. 24.
Okay, we're 6 months shy of 20 years.
September's...
Close enough.
Okay.
It's close enough.
Okay.
Leave it.
Okay. Anyway, first impressions.
I don't know what that was. First impressions, I like this one. I like this one a whole lot.
Interesting.
It was very interesting. My first thought, like 5 minutes into the episode, is okay, I'm very much detecting the episodic nature, like the formula that they're going to be fitting into. Go to a new state, pick a random state, point your finger at a city inside of it, show us the mystery, run the opening credits. Don't really give us very much information. Let's meet a girl that Dean thinks is really hot. Let's make a bunch of early 2000s references that didn't age too well. And then we're going to solve the murder after a couple of theories that one of them pans out to be true. That was my incorrect prediction about what the show was. And I wasn't questioning why this is a show you love so much, but I was starting to wonder. We got a few minutes into it. I really liked it. They were doing some good humor. They are developing these characters rapidly, considering this is just the 3rd episode. We're starting to pick up some very fine lines in the sand between Sam and Dean. And I actually noticed about halfway through, I don't know if you noticed, when I checked the timestamp on the episode, because I was thinking, man, we're 23 minutes into this episode. And I still don't know the first thing about what is in this water. They kept saying Loch Ness, so I ruled out Loch Ness. I'm like, okay, they're not going to give it to it. They're not going to say the word this many times if it actually is Loch Ness, because that's a terrible episode. But they just kept hinting around. They talked about a wraith They had talked about Loch Ness as well. But the suspense kind of sat for a long time. I liked this one. What was your impression? I know you've seen it, so you know how it ended, but it's been a while.
Yeah. Truth be told, when I've rewatched the first 5 seasons several times. It used to be kind of my go-to comfort rewatch when I had a lot more time on my hands. And this episode, truth be told, I would kind of skip through. Not all the way through. Like, I wouldn't skip it entirely, but I would fast forward through a lot of it and get to the scenes that I liked the best.
Really?
Yeah. Although that little boy's head poking out of the water is creepy. It's creepy AF.
Oh, that freeze frame.
Oh, it's so creepy. So creepy. So that part, that was like the thing that not necessarily sends shivers down your spine, but it's the thing that's like, like it kind of hits you. It hits you right there. Right there.
Yep. Yeah, that one. We see, I mean, especially now, this has been another 20 years ago. And so we've seen more creepy, the aesthetics, CGI has progressed things, what they will show in movies and TV have progressed. That still freaked me out.
I mean, part of it is practical. That was a real, probably man, actually, that was, smaller in stature, made to look like a little boy that's dead, sticking his head out of the water, I'm sure, as opposed to trying to CGI it. There was just something about it that just made it oh God. Probably part of it is that it's a boy. Little boys, little girls. I feel like it ups the creep factor.
I know. Well, it's something that we're using now more and more and more. Opening scene of The Walking Dead did the same thing with a little girl. We were talking about that yesterday because we're watching all the new spinoffs to see how do we feel about these. Still TBD.
Yeah. So anyway, I do like this episode for the most part, but it didn't give a lot of what I really enjoy about the series, which is why I liked Wendigo. Was it didn't give a lot of brother stuff. It had some moments, but some more funny moments than there were connecting moments.
That surprises me. Can I mention one bit? I want to hear you talk into it. Okay. This was the first time, and I had made a note about this. This is the first time we really saw some actual tension between the brothers in the very beginning. Because as soon as the episode started and they're showing like Wisconsin, and last week they were in Colorado, I'm sitting here like, wait a minute, isn't their dad missing? Like, this is the whole point of why they left California. So assuming we're episodic week to week, let's just go old school with the template here. They've gone from California to Colorado to now Wisconsin, supposedly looking for their dad. As soon as the episode started, that's what I thought. It's like, wait a minute, their dad's missing. They're on a manhunt. And then they actually ended up arguing a little bit about it. And it was a brotherly argue of, we're not going to come to draw blood here, but it was an actual tense moment, and that was a very character-centric moment between the two. The audience is thinking it, but they used it as a point to show how these two are different. And there was a problem. There's an actual problem.
Yeah, it's not only highlighting a way in which they're different, I think it also highlights what you will come to know as kind of an arc of these earlier seasons of Sam and Dean finding a new type of relationship as adults. Because I don't know if you could really tell from what you've seen so far, but there definitely has a vibe of Dean has been in charge. That's the little brother. He's 4 years younger. Dean's in charge. What Dean says goes. And I think in this episode you're seeing Sam push back about it a little bit, but then he ultimately backs down. Like, he's like, we're just trying to find Dad, and then Dan. Oh my God! Wow.
Good old Dan in the back seat.
Then Dean basically kind of says, "That's the end of it. That's what we're doing."
Yeah.
And Sam kind of just goes like, "Okay, fine. Like, show me this article or whatever." Like he backs down. He challenges Dean because he's upset, and he has a right to be upset. But then Dean ultimately shuts him down, and Sam accepts it because I think. I guess you could answer this better. Like, you can tell what the dynamic between the brothers is.
I'm glad you saw that, because I got a very different read from that situation. But I do think that the dynamics are very cool, that they showed us that. That's kind of the reality of when you're doing anything with your family for more than a couple of days. This stuff just happens. But they always skip past it in movies. But this is a very real part of their relationship. So, yeah, but I think that especially at that age, Sam is
22.
He's growing up. I mean, he's hit actual milestones that you start to realize that you're not a kid anymore. And so you start challenging boundaries, challenging previous dynamics. Because I know that my brother and I, because you may have some stuff like this too, because you have two brothers, very different age range, sort of.
Actually.
Well, the brother-sister dynamic is going to be a little different. You got one brother that you're much closer to in age, and one that's a bit further. But I grew up a lot of halves and steps, but I have one full blood. And shout out Jay. We fought like crazy growing up. I mean, argued all the time. I thought his name was Bicker for a while, because that's just what we always heard. It's just stop bickering. But we also grew up in Texas and Tennessee, so we didn't
mostly Tennessee.
Either way, we fought all the time. And then we got to high school. We were 3 years apart, so my senior year was his freshman year. And something clicked. I don't know what it was. He might have a very different version of this story. But something clicked, and we became friends at that point. But all the time from there's always been a dynamic struggle, I guess. Because as we became adults, we became different people growing in our own directions. I was going through my major life changes and issues and chapter markers, like huge milestones, and he was going through his own. Some great, some not great. And our dynamic evolved a lot around that time period. And I guess it was similar to how Dean was. I was just simply older, so I was the boss, or at least that was the assumption. And we very much don't have that. I think that what we have now is a very good, very respectful dynamic. But so much of that change occurred around that time period of early 20s. Sometimes saying stupid things, sometimes deciding stupid things on both fronts, and doing things that were very good as far as reestablishing new boundaries as we were growing up.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I love the show, is because of the brothers. And, we go through 15 seasons here, so they go from being mid-early 20s to, 40, mid-30s to 40. And that's a significant change. As much as we say you're not a kid anymore, like you're starting not to become a kid anymore, when Sam's 22, let's be real, Sam is still a kid. He just doesn't realize it, because he's not 15 years older than that. When the older you get, the more you realize that you're early 20s, or you're still a kid figuring it out.
Didn't feel like it though.
Exactly. But to your point, yes, Sam definitely is starting to challenge the dynamic that always was between the brothers. And some of it's out of necessity, because, they've faced life and death situations. And so sometimes it was like, the 10-year-old is going to know better than the 6-year-old, know? But not to mention the fact that you'll learn this in later seasons. I don't really think this is really a spoiler so much, but the dad put a lot of pressure on Dean to be able to take care of Sam, because he was off hunting things. They mentioned that they grew up in that life. And so you can imagine, if the dad is away a lot, where is that responsibility going to fall? It's going to fall on the older sibling, of course.
Dean gets put in this, you're the older one, so you have to become the caretaker type dynamic.
Parental, and having to be responsible, and not only having to be responsible, but you are responsible for what happens. So if something bad happens, you're the one that's responsible, because you're the oldest.
Which, without being addressed, without being actually physically changed in a real family, that can have a residual effect.
Absolutely.
That can last through decades, through 30s and 40s, until there's finally this screaming moment of, Stop treating me like a child.
Yeah, and you're going to see that a lot in this series. It's something that the brothers definitely struggle with in their dynamic. And I think that you start seeing it. And I think on this rewatch, having more knowledge that I did back when I did, a lot of binging of this show, is you're seeing the psychology of it. Like you're seeing the hint of it in early seasons. Sam breaking that dynamic in early seasons. I don't think I saw earlier when I watched it as him trying to break that dynamic. I saw it more as his girlfriend died and he's irritated, and so he wants to be doing something about it. But now on this rewatch years later, I'm like, oh, that's actually the kind of what do they call it? Foreshadowing. The foreshadowing of Sam breaking the dynamic that him and Dean have always had. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not happening in a couple episodes. Sure. It's a long struggling, for years they struggle with this. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of see it as the beginning of that breaking of the dynamic, even if it's in its very, very infancy.
You're also now on the backside of your own relatable experience. And I'm not thinking of anything that we've discussed. I'm not thinking of any one episode in particular, but you redefined the dynamics with both of your brothers, your parents, all that. And the first time that you watched the show, if my math is right, you were about the age that Sam was. You hadn't been through that yourself yet.
When I first watched the show in 2005, I was not Sam's age. I was in high school. But thanks for playing.
You know what I mean. I mean, you're much closer to where Sam was at the end of the show now.
Yes.
Than you were whenever you first watched this.
Absolutely.
You were in Sam's life chapter. You were going through very similar things. Yes, at that point, you were getting ready to go into college, and he just finished college. The distance between those two life events is nothing compared to where we are now.
True.
You've experienced it. It's one of the great things about getting to watch shows repeatedly. I know you and I go through a whole thing about this, is that I like to, if a show hits me, if I feel a very, very strong connection with a show, I'll watch it over and over again. And you poke at me for that sometimes.
Yeah, I used to watch Supernatural over and over again. There's a few other shows that I would repeat, but Supernatural is definitely the biggest. And I have rewatched some shows as an adult, but generally, no, I don't rewatch because there's almost always something new that I'd rather be watching. I also don't experience TV in the same way you do. You'll watch TV in the background all the time. You'll have it on in the background all the time, or when you're sleeping, you have it on. I don't do that. And so the opportunity for rewatching is much. I have to, when I sit down to watch TV, it's dedicated. I'm there to watch TV, and so I'm not going to rewatch something before I catch up on the episodes of TV that I haven't watched yet. That's just, I'd rather watch something new first.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that side. I think that the counterpoint to it, though, is there's a relative safety in. I know that I like the show, so I know that I'm going to like the show. So I don't, whenever you watch something new, you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. But as you change in your life, you get a different appreciation for what you've seen. So it's almost like I know I'm going to like it, so I can just sit back and experience it a little bit more. And for me, TV is emotional connection. There's life lessons. It's a really great way to experience who we are as people. Mm-hmm. Because you get to see it in a way that's entertaining. It's easy as opposed to just reading about what somebody who's been through a traumatic life event may experience, or to watch it in an entertainment way. You get to learn more about yourself. You get to learn more about other people. Plus,
Absolutely.
It was great on TV. I think that, like watching Trek. Trek is a great example. Both my parents watched The Next Generation. I saw it very passively. Didn't really connect to it. And then really started getting into Star Trek in college, because I was experiencing things that made the show much more appealing. But the young kids in the show were my age then, so I was relating more to them. And the older characters were senior. And now I'm starting to get to a age where I'm closer in relation to Picard's age now.
You're tearing up a little bit over there.
Shut up. I don't know if they're happy tears or sad tears. But I find that rewatching certain issues that I just simply couldn't understand at the time. I didn't have the emotional intelligence to understand them at the time.
Yeah. I get that. I think that No offense to you.
There we go.
But you've made large leaps and bounds in your emotional intelligence in the last like 5 years or so. Maybe even 2 or 3 years. I've definitely, obviously, I've learned a lot since I was in high school. We all have. But I wouldn't say that mine was as steep as yours was. So I am rewatching these now. Yeah, let's call it 10 years since I've seen them. I don't know exactly how long it is, but 10 years ago, I wasn't like, my read on these things is pretty similar. Like this, you've asked me last episode, like how I feel about it now, and I'm like, not the same. Yeah, and then today, the one thing I could point out that came with like age and experience is noticing that kind of breadcrumb that was laid in the third episode about Sam trying to change this dynamic. Like, I feel like that's like the one thing I really took away. I was like, ooh, I bet, like, I understand that better now. I'm not trying to say that I was like wise way beyond my years or anything, but I think that you and me, we have our strengths and our weaknesses. And one of my strengths is that I have had a bit more of an emotional intelligence earlier on than you did. And you have a lot of things that you have that I did not have early on. Everybody has their own versions of intelligence, whether it's music intelligence or book intelligence, if you want to call it that, emotional intelligence, whatever it is. We all have our various ones that are and attributes. And I just happened to, I think a lot of it was the household I grew up in, and I had a best friend who was also extremely emotionally intelligent. And so when you have somebody in your life that is kind of pushing that narrative, not in a bad way, obviously, just making you asking questions that maybe 17-year-olds aren't usually asking, your brain gets trained a certain way. Yes, of course I'm talking about Peter.
Yeah, no, I get that. The take that I got from that scene was it made me wonder the Jeffrey Dean Morgan, throwback to episode 1. The Jeffrey Dean Morgan of it all. Dad has gone missing. We're looking for him. It's important enough to go driving across the country to do it. But we're not in any kind of hurry. We're not panicking. It made me wonder how often this happens. It put me in this state of, okay, well, Dad has gone on a hunting trip and we haven't heard from him for a couple of days. Is this again? But it's too risky. We can't just dismiss it. Because if something is wrong, he needs us, so I have to go. But also on the flip side, nobody really seems to be in a panic. Let's just take our little side quest while we're here and save somebody else. So maybe this is a normal thing. And this is part of the new guy gets to make his bad predictions, and a lot of them are going to be wrong, but it's still fun.
I think they've hinted at the fact that, I mean, they said in the pilot, so he always goes missing, he's always fine, he always comes back. So I do think that, I don't think it's an evolved sense of maturity of like, well, there's nothing we can do anyway. Like what's happening is happening. We can't actually change it. It's not an evolved maturity that these boys have. I think it is the fact that this has happened before where he has gone off and they haven't heard from him. This seems to be a bit different though, because it seems like it's an active trying to stay away from them. And it has been longer. So it's definitely different, but the fact that he's gone is not different. And I also think you'll learn later seasons that these boys have this feeling about their dad that he's a bit invincible, which all kids kind of do in a lot of ways. Like you don't ever think something's going to happen necessarily. And, he's grown up. They've grown up with him hunting. He's always fine. He's hunted, all of these monsters their entire lives, and he's always fine. So there's like this thing in the back of their brain that's probably like, but he's always fine. Like he's not, Dad's always fine. He's okay. We know that because he always is. It's been 22 years, of this, and so I think they're not panicking that he's like dead or something because they're kind of naive minds in a lot of ways. Where Dad's always fine.
Yeah. And that is the worst part of growing up, is realizing your parents are not invincible.
Yeah.
That they're human.
They're human, yeah.
That part sucks.
I think figuring out that they're human doesn't suck. I think that just the kind of realizing of, I wouldn't say invincible, but just that people can just, bad things happen, that's pretty much that. Bad things happen. People die. People get into accidents. Things happen. Like, it doesn't matter how good, your mom or your dad or whoever is, they could still get cancer and die. So I think the more you grow up, the more you realize that bad things happen, and it doesn't matter how healthy somebody is or how young, relatively young they are, they could still be gone like that. I don't know if that snap picked up, but I snapped.
We'll fix it in post.
So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily, for me, it's not a bad thing to realize that, my parents or the adults in my life are human. I think it makes me feel like less, I don't know, it just makes me feel more normal. Like being X amount of years old, you're supposed to have, quote unquote, figured it all out. But to realize that, your parents who are in their 60s or whatever still haven't figured it out in a lot of ways, basically means that you're right on track with everybody else. So you're fine. Don't worry about it. You're okay. It's okay to be human. It's okay to not have figured it out. And, yeah.
And the older I get, the more I realize that the age of figuring it out is just...
it's a myth.
Complete and total crap.
Yeah.
I think we put it there for our own hope, like for our own sense of survival. Like, there's going to be an age, like I have no idea what I'm doing right now. Like 18 years old, 19 years old, I thought I was just doing fine. And then as soon as I got out into the world, realized that I didn't know jack. And those were the insightful moments of my life, was when I realized I didn't actually know how to do anything. Don't know how to cook. Don't know what a paring knife is. What do you mean I have to pay taxes every year? Who's this FICA guy and why is he getting all my money? Each of those, I needed to realize what I didn't know, and assuming that there would be an endpoint that, okay, now I'll have it all figured out.
Yeah, that you and I had a very different experience.
I guess so.
I mean, I don't know when. One of my favorite questions to ask people is, you are X amount of years old. So, 39, you are 39 years old. What do you know for sure? Or if you're 36, whatever it is. And I've learned over the years that the way that people answer that question is kind of indicative of where they're at in their life. Because I've had people who've answered that question with, saying things that they can't possibly actually know for sure. And I'm not talking about your standardized facts of like 2 + 2 = 4. That's what I'm talking about. They'll be like, well, this politician is corrupt and he's a horrible person or whatever. And I'm like, but do you know that for absolute 100% sure? Like, there is no doubt in your mind. And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so this person you've never met, and you can't possibly know the context of everything that goes into whatever it is you're talking about. And my answer to that question has always been something along the lines of like, the only thing that I know for sure is I don't know anything for sure, and I want to say it's in my early 20s where I started asking that question to people. And, for you to say that when you were like in your early 20s, you're like, wait a second, like I have to do this and I have to do that. And it's just like, I feel like it's very indicative of like where we were in our journeys in the early 20s. That it took you maybe a little longer to figure that. Actually, when I asked you that question,
I was going to ask, I don't remember my answer, but I do remember you asking me that question.
Yeah. There was a few things that you said.
Sounds about right.
None of which were that you didn't know anything for sure. I think one of them was that God has an active hand in our lives or something like that. I forget the way you phrased it. But then the funny thing about that is we just happen to be talking about something later on, years later, and you expressed the opposite opinion. We weren't referencing that original conversation at all, but you said that and it sparked a memory of mine. And I think I brought it up at the time, like, by the way, you once said the opposite of this. And I think you weren't saying it like as a definitive opinion. You were actually just more questioning it. And which kind of is indicative of your journey of figuring out like you don't know everything for sure. I think you were questioning, does he have a? And I was just like, but originally when I asked you that question of what you know for sure, you knew that for sure. And now you're like, maybe I don't know. And I was just like, interesting. It's just funny that it came around full circle in a lot of ways. That was one of the things you said. I'm trying to remember there was a couple other things. I can't remember what they are at the moment.
Well, we'll just have to come back to this in another episode then. Because I just skipped what I said. I don't remember.
With Jeff and Steph.
Yeah, that's part of why we're doing this. I think it's going to be really fun as we develop these characters more. I can't wait until we get into the other show, partially because Star Trek rules all. But secondly, once we can start putting the dynamics parallel to each other, once we go through the first season of Trek after coming off of the first season of Supernatural and then going into the second season of Supernatural, into the second season of Trek, I think it's going to be really interesting as far as the dynamic conversations. Because this isn't just about the show. This isn't about the plot. The plot is nothing more than a progressive device to keep the narrative moving forward. Which is why we're doing this in the first place.
Yeah.
Oh, whatever. Don't look at me like that. Well, anyway, speaking of life chapters, poor little Lucas, this small child who has gone completely silent. Right now, my mom's thinking, man, this would have been great if it had happened to Jeff. He would have shut up. Bad taste? Maybe in bad taste. But little Lucas won't talk. And I had a really up moment when we get to see this Lucas who isn't talking, because I'm starting to get not a beef but an anticipation about Dean and our complete lack of backstory with this guy. Nothing.
It's episode 3.
I know that, but Sam, we get so much of his backstory so far. We've got so much more of Sam's backstory than we do of Dean's. So much more. Dean pops a squat next to this little kid. He's looking at him. He's like, yeah, I saw something once too. When I was younger, I saw something. I guess we're finally going to get some backstory here. And like Sam's leaning up against the door, and he's all interested, and then he didn't go into it, and just basically let us know that this was the one thing that they've already showed us about Dean's past. So they haven't given us jack about his past other than one thing, and we've now experienced it and rehashed it. And they're not giving us anything else. This is going to start becoming my personal vendetta that I need some Dean backstory. I was really disappointed about that.
Well, you also, I think you're really connecting with Dean in a lot of ways. I think that the way that he interacts with the world is similar to you. Sorry, Christy is messaging us.
Well, Christy can wait. We're busy. The research assistant.
Actually, we decided that she's the executive producer.
Oh, did we really? She's trying to get that DGA membership?
That would be a Producers Guild membership.
Yeah, that's totally what I meant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the Directors Guild.
Obviously, everything in the industry.
Executive producer. Producer.
Listen.
Just saying.
No, you're not just saying. You're rubbing it in. So, I want to hit a sidebar for a second, because you had mentioned when you were reading the beginning that you're reading the cast, not the cast, the producers. I don't know.
Writer and director?
Yeah. You mentioned that it was really interesting because somebody ended up becoming a showrunner.
Mm-hmm.
What is a showrunner and what do they do?
We talked about this in episode 1.
Completely?
Uh-huh.
All right, so thanks. We'll fix that in post.
So go to episode 1 if you've not seen it. If you want to know what
that's what I was doing.
If you want to know what a showrunner is.
We're teasing that you need to go back to episode 1. Yeah, we were. Yeah, just like we talked about.
But speaking of behind the scenes things, there is a interview or it's episode commentary or something in which Jensen, who plays Dean, he talks about this episode and how completely terrifying it was for him, because at the end of the episode, Dean saves this boy in the water, and he's like holding him out of the water, and that was done practically. And they had divers underneath Jensen holding his legs so that like keep him up basically. But can you imagine being in water and your inclination, of course, your first instinct is to be kicking your legs to keep you up. But instead you have these people being held and you're holding a 12-year-old boy in your arms, a real 12-year-old boy in your arms, not a stunt kid. You're not a stunt person. I feel like they asked in early seasons, they asked a lot of these boys, Jensen and Jared. They did, I think, I remember some scene in which they're, one of the producers, a director, somebody, maybe it was Eric Kripke, was watching. He was like, no, we got to do a different angle because that looks too much, like we can tell that's not Jensen or whatever. Like, well, no, that is Jensen or Jared, whoever. And like, what? Meaning they thought it was a stunt double. But whatever they were doing should have been a stunt double, but we had Jensen and Jared doing it. I think they asked a lot of them. And now, granted, these are athletic human beings, and you wouldn't know it necessarily because they both are tall. They're not both short like a lot of actors are. They're both very tall. Jensen's over 6 foot. I think he's 6'1", and Jared is 6'4". So he actually looks short. Jensen does because Jared is so freaking tall. And so they're both athletic human beings and they're able to do these athletic things, but still stunt doubles are there for insurance purposes. And in early seasons, they had a lot of different, I mean, what they should have done really is had them maybe in a pool to make it look like a lake and have it so that Jensen's his feet could be on the ground. But instead they had 2 divers, which is still safe, but it ups the anxiety and stress of the actual human being that is performing the act.
Now, can stuff like that still happen now? Because we've been through a couple of strikes since then. Studio involvement, and I hear you talking about things that, studio weighs in on something or XYZ, whatever the case might be. And the studio or the contracts, or there's so many things that talk about safety elements that just make it seem like if there is a plausibility of safety in question, then this thing has to be done in a certain way in order to remove all issues of safety. Obviously not perfectly, but it just seems like having an actor holding a kid underwater with 2 scuba divers in a lake, it just seems like, based on how you talk about things now, it seems like that would never happen.
I don't know that it would never happen. I don't think there's necessarily an exact way that you have to shoot these types of scenes or other more dangerous scenes. I think that there is reasonable safety measures that need to be met. And there are stunt coordinators, there's ADs, there's producers, there's safety people from the studio who all get together and determine if whatever is come up with as the solution to be safe, if that is safe enough. I know that anytime you have water stuff, you got to have some sort of water safety person around. But I don't think necessarily what they did was unsafe. I think, though, that it would affect the actor's ability to be comfortable necessarily. I don't think that the boy or Jensen were in actual danger. I think that they put a lot of stress and anxiety on Jensen. And he clearly handled it and he did it well. But, he talks about it, years later about that scene. So it clearly affected him in some way. And I'm not saying the guy is traumatized or anything, but he was safe. It's just, I can't imagine. I mean, someone's holding your legs when you're trying to. I mean, it's going against your instinct. Even though you know you're safe, your instinct is to be paddling your legs, especially when you have another human being a child in your arms.
So it could still happen that way.
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, and you said practical. What is practical? You said this scene was obviously practical.
They shot it in an actual lake. As opposed to doing it in a pool where then they later, CGI, VFX or whatever, make it look like a lake. They didn't have the budget for such things back then. So Supernatural had to do a lot of practical things, I would imagine. And also, even if the VFX things that we're able to accomplish now, we're able to accomplish with a lot less money as well. Like, I know now a lot of times they'll throw things to VFX instead of special effects because it's actually cheaper. But back then, like, for example, bullet hits. We a lot of times will do VFX bullet hits instead of special effects. They're called Zerk hits to make it look like something is, hitting a bullet's hitting something like a wall or whatever. But now times we do VFX. I wonder if 2005 doing that one little bullet hole in a wall VFX would be a lot more expensive and time consuming than it would be now. So my guess is it's kind of flipped a little bit in terms of what's cheaper. Special effects or visual effects. And special effects is practical, and visual effects is obviously like in post.
Computers and
this. Computers, yeah.
Well, nowadays.
Yeah.
VFX could have been something different before, like splicing film, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so practically means basic. Could I say that if you see it that way, that's what it was? If it's people swimming in a lake, then practically means they were swimming in the lake.
Yeah.
They're not in a pool. They're not in an indoor place, making it look like.
And in some ways, doing it in a pool is in some ways practical because someone's still in water, but you have to then later do the computer element to make it look like it was a lake. So it's not, that would be more of a mixture of practical and visual, but when, in this case, they were in an actual lake. So it's fully practical.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So they did talk about something. I caught it. This is perhaps bad writing. I don't know. I thought it was kind of genius. But at the very beginning of the episode, you've got two brothers looking for their dad, and they're arguing about how they're going to look for your dad. And then later, probably in the first 15 minutes, you had two different people say that losing your kid is worse than dying. We had two different people say it. Mm-hmm. The dad said it whenever he lost both of his kids. And then the young mom.
The older mom, Peter's mom.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. It was Peter's mom. They both said losing your kid is worse than dying. Mm-hmm. But then you've got these two, like you've even said it this way too, you've got these two brothers that are looking for your dad. You have to be wondering if dad's really okay at this point because they've already been looking for him for a little bit. Maybe I'm looking for connections where there is none. It feels like that wasn't accidental.
I don't think it was accidental, but I don't think it was connected to the brothers. I think that they were trying to connect Peter, the boy who was killed 35 years ago, to what's happening now. His mother lost her son, and she felt like it was worse than dying. And now Peter is going after the children of these two men now who accidentally killed him and then left him and left his mother not knowing what happened. And so I think it was a point of connection of saying Peter's trying to make these men experience the same thing that his mother experienced when he went missing / was dead.
I get that. But do you think that Sam and Dean are going to be feeling any sort of connection to that?
I don't think so.
They're looking for their dad right now, and they're pretty sure he's probably fine, but in the back of their mind?
I didn't get that. I've never thought that, but I don't think it's necessarily outside the realm of possibility. Now, that being said, I think that they probably would have thrown us some sort of bone. Like, after those lines were said, they might have at some point re-referenced their dad, even if it's short, just mentioning him again in the episode, but they didn't.
In fact, they didn't tie it up nicely for us.
It doesn't necessarily have to be nice time, but if something like that's reminding them of their dad, why couldn't it just be the fact that they brought him up at all again, as opposed to never mentioning him again for the rest of the episode?
Other than needing to continue it as a plot device from episode to episode, we have to keep remembering that we're actually looking for their dad right now.
Right, but I think that in the next episode, you're not going to necessarily remember that was the key line from the previous episode. You're not going to necessarily connect it. You also have no idea how much time passes between these episodes.
That's true.
So
it's at least a few days because of the driving distance.
Yeah.
But
if
unless
the next
baby is super.
No. Well, he is super, just in a different way. Or she. Shoot. Anyway.
Oh my goodness, we're gonna have to keep a spoiler counter, aren't we?
Oh no, I say that baby's a she. I don't know why I would say he. Basically, is what I'm saying. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think like the next episode. It could be in story time wise, it could be 2 weeks later. So if they mention their dad in the next episode, you're not gonna be like, oh, I bet you they're thinking because they in the last episode they said that it's worse than that. No one's making that connection. It's too subtle. It's too subtle for what this show is, like how it's written. You have no idea how much time is passing.
I feel like I kind of want the showrunners to be that developed. I want it to be that deep.
There are some.
I want it to be that multi-layered, and you kind of catch it before it happens.
There are things that happen. I just don't think that's one of them. But one, again, in the early part of the episode when the brothers are having that tension, that is the early seed of Sam pushing back against Dean.
Yeah, that is true.
There's definitely seeds that get dropped all over the place. There's one that is currently in front, quote unquote, right in front of your face, and you have no idea yet.
That's interesting.
Also, I think Christy has bugged our home here because she said you'll get more of Dean's backstory through the show. They do a good job of explaining why he is the way he is.
So our research assistant is now telling us about Dean.
Well, I think what's happening is she's watching our previous episode at the moment, and she's giving us some comments. However, we were just talking about how you're upset that you don't have Dean backstory, and she texted that. So I think it's quite funny.
Yeah, we'll see how long this goes before they finally start giving us some backstory.
Anyway,
so
what else you got?
Fast forward just a little bit. Good old sheriff here. This is after Bill. After Father Bill gets killed.
Father Bill.
We watch him in this
in the drink
boat flip. Yeah, in the drink. Seems like the sheriff really, really enjoys sonaring the lake because he's done it multiple times.
No, he just mentions it multiple times.
Well, because after the opening scene, they sonared looking for him or looking for her, couldn't find anything, and then they didn't obviously with Will. Kid who drowned in the sink. Unless they sonared the sink. Right? He didn't tell us, but I wouldn't.
He just mentions it multiple times.
And then, but here was my thing. We could see Bill riding out on the lake, right? Boom, whatever the pop creation element is, it needs to get flipped, and then the boat has just vanished. Did you catch this?
Yeah, well, the thing is, it didn't vanish. Peter sucked it down into the drink with him.
Well, but then they sonared the lake.
But they sonared the lake before that. However, it took them to the spirit realm? I don't know, man.
So there's this broken boat in the spirit realm?
Maybe, but they also didn't sonar the lake after Will, or after the dad.
I thought he said they did.
No, he talked about he talked about sonaring the lake, like he kept talking about it.
I thought he said he did it because that was when he started getting suspicious of the brothers. Because I remember thinking, wow, he did that really, really fast.
No, he was just talking about how he had done it after, like, in a couple days ago, whatever it was that he first did it.
I don't know, man. There is a missing boat that really should have been addressed.
You're really upset about this boat.
That boat disappeared way too fast for a floating pile of wood.
Okay, man.
All right, anyway. So, yeah, I did like, it was a little bit later when Andrea, the girl, after the tub incident, in which you were very upset about the changing water level.
The water levels.
Let's talk about the water level.
This woman has the water on full blast when it's already like an inch from the top, not even an inch from the top going over, and it's still full on. And then this whole attack is happening, and the water's spilling out. And then at one point, actually before the attack happened, the water level went down like 3 inches.
I was going to ask if you noticed that.
Yeah, the water went down like 3 inches after. And then the whole attack happened, and all this water's flying everywhere, as it should. And then after she goes under, the water's all the way back up to the top again.
Yep.
I'm like, what is going on? I mean, look, I guess the whole point is that this Peter spirit person controls water. So that maybe is the explanation.
No, this isn't Moana.
That's the story explanation. The real explanation is that they weren't paying close enough attention to the water level.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and by the time Sam came in and dove in to go grab her and pull her out, the water level was back up to full level. And then I noticed as they were pulling her out, take this large mass and start removing it from a tub full of water, the water level as they pulled her out was still at the top. Even after, like, when her foot was coming out and the whole rest of her body was already out, they still had the water level up at the top.
Yeah. Look, they were probably
running. This was a good show.
It is a good show. They're probably running short on the day. They probably just had to get it done. I don't know.
Well, regardless, the way that she acted, I remember in the last episode I was not the biggest fan of the day player, the character they bring in, to be the main focus of this little
Haley.
Side quest. Sure, Haley. This one, I liked how she did it. With Andrea, and you were talking about Bill, the dad, Father Bill, grieving well as an actor. I like how Andrea was doing this. Like, she was just certain beforehand when she was seeing, this is what happened, somebody else drowned in the lake, Lucas just going through post-traumatic stress.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Post-traumatic stress. And then she goes through this experience, and her certainty is certainly shattered here. Like she's 90% certain about everything that's been going on, but now 10% has this completely unexplained episode that she just went through in the bathtub. Her describing all of the physics of what's going on, there should be a logical explanation, but there's just something that doesn't make any sense. And she's not talking like that. She's speechless. She's kind of broken about it. In this true and genuine, I have no idea what's going on right now. And that scares me. I thought that was a very cool, very neat portrayal of what a character would be going through. As opposed to in the last episode with girl Haley, it was just like, okay, what's really going on? Oh, we're hunting ghosts and supernaturals. Oh, okay, cool, let's go. Like, it just didn't feel near as genuine as what it would be like. But in this case, I got the sense that this is what would really happen. You're dealing with something you absolutely cannot explain, but you live in a world, especially as a single mother, that you have to have answers. You have to have explanations. And there's just so many little things that are going on that she cannot explain, and it's finally just too much. She's gone from all answers to just barely even being able to speak.
Yeah. I think that the day players on this episode did a really good job. I think Father Bill did a great job.
That what made him Catholic at this point. They're all Father Bill.
I think he did a really good job of portraying grief, especially of a older man who probably grew up being told not to express emotion openly, and he's just sitting on that dock, just quietly suffering. And they come up and they say, "We're from," he's like, "I don't care where you're from." He's just really just given up on experiencing any more joy in his life, and just given up in general. And I think the way that actor played it was beautiful. And I think Andrea did a great job too. I think when it's like this silent moment where Sam comes up and he shakes his head like, "I didn't find Lucas," and they cut, I don't know if they cut the music entirely or if it just became like one single note that you barely notice, but like her silent scream, it's not, I don't even know that it's necessarily a scream. It was more of a silent, like, letting out of complete horror, that her boy might be gone. And I think that was, I don't know, very real. Just it was very beautifully done, I think. Not just the way that they shot it, but the way that the actor portrayed how someone might react in that moment. And I think generally this episode was shot very beautifully and creatively with the sync with the clear bottom.
Clear bottom. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah. And that I think is a very I don't know what the word is. It's Kim Manners directed it, and Kim Manners he directs a lot of episodes of Supernatural, and he is really good at creative directing, and I think he did a great job with this episode.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so now at this point in the episode, now we're in the lake, and this is where the boy's head pokes out of the water.
Do we need to rehash that again?
I mean, it was a little bit that I was kind of hoping, and maybe this is a great segue from this director on how they do things, because I noticed as soon as it popped up, aside from the ick feeling that it gave me deep underneath my skin, it was incredibly simple. Like, it was just, you could just see water in all directions. There's no land, there's no reference point of how far out are we, how far it was just water. And then this sepia monochromatic
head.
Half of a head.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like, because we had just seen, Lucas had just gone under, right?
Yeah, he had pulled him, the arm had reached out and grabbed Lucas into the water, and then he popped out.
So you're hoping to see Lucas come out. But no. You see a head pop out that's very clearly not Lucas. And then the other portion of it didn't bob. It didn't, like, the way that it came out,
It's just like,
had a remnant for me of, like, Navy SEALs when they're getting ready to infiltrate. Like, it comes up, and I felt like Peter was looking at me, not the other way around. I think that might have been the part that creeped me out the most about it, because all of a sudden this thing that's coming at us, well, us in the story, this thing that's coming after our heroes, is not a just this wild monster that has no consciousness. It's just doing what it does. It is all of a sudden consciousness. And that makes it so much more terrifying, I think.
I think in this case, simple and leaving much to be desired in a good way was the way to go. Because what they could have done is ended up showing us the entire boy. But leaving it to just half of his face.
Yeah, just half.
It leaves so much more questions than answers. And it leaves this kind of, you don't know where he's going to pop up next. If his whole entire, granted he's a spirit, so in theory he can just like pop all the way around, right? But there is a sense there's a sense of safety of if he's fully like up on the dock, you know where that is.
Yeah.
You can avoid that. When this little head just pops up, what? Where is that head going to pop up next? I think there's also a sort of leaning into the fear people have of water. Of like, you don't know what's under there.
I mean, the name of the episode is Dead in the Water, yeah. So yeah, that's fair.
I mean, I personally don't have a fear of water.
I might now.
But I do recall going snorkeling at one point in the Virgin Islands, and we were like, there was like this like kind of cave that was like in the water, but there was still very much like an open ceiling above you. It wasn't like you had like a very low ceiling cave. It was like a cave that was basically half filled with water, if you want to say. And I started going in there, but then there was all these like, I don't know, jellyfish and like and fish and all these things. And I was just like, all of a sudden I was like, nope. I'm noping right out of this, because it was like there was just too many things surrounding me that I was just like, I feel very not claustrophobic, but almost like I don't have a clear ability to just have my autonomy. Not my bubble was going to be infiltrated, and there was nothing I could do about it. And so for those that have a fear of water, I could feel like this could be extra for them, because it's like all of a sudden, wait a second, now we're dealing with freaking dead children popping up, like zombie children essentially popping up. Like, I'm never going in a lake. Yeah, I'm never going in a lake again. Like, who knows what's down there, you know?
Yeah, that was a tingly feeling. I'm feeling tingly now.
But I think that was a genius move to only have the like half the head. And I don't know if that was a Kim Manners decision or if that was Sarah and her name, the other writer name escapes me, Rael. I don't know if that was they wrote it in there, like we see this half, this his head halfway pop out of the water in the script. I don't know if that was written or if that was a decision from Kim or it was a discussion, but it was definitely the way to go.
That did perfectly link into my follow-up question is when these moments occur, TV, movies, whatever, where does that typically come from? Or can it vary? Just whoever has the good idea.
It varies. I mean, it could very well have been written in the script that we see Peter's half head sticking out of the water, popping out of the water, or it could have said we see Peter coming out of the water, or it could have said nothing to the effect. And Kim was like, "Hey, I think this would be a great ad here," and they said, "You know what? That would be great." No matter what, though, it was absolutely 100% a discussion that happened. It wasn't just, it was written in the script and they never talked about it again. And it wasn't just Kim decided to do it on the day, because you got to prepare for that. You can't just do it. So there was it was probably, I mean, it might have been a real kid, but I would think that they got a stunt actor who looks like that's smaller in stature, and they made, you know, they made him look dead and had him pop up. But you have to prepare for that. So it had to have been a conversation.
So these epically cool or terrifying or amazing, scary, whatever, like the moments that really impact, the moments that really hit you as a viewer, these do tend to come from they could come from a plethora of different places. They could come from multiple, but there is an open door to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
When the show's being produced, does anybody just get to say, "Hey, this would be cool"?
I wouldn't say anybody. I mean, in theory, anybody, but there is definitely a level of knowing your lane. You know, the AD department, my department, assistant director department, our lane isn't story. That's not our lane. However, there is, depending on how comfortable you are with the producers, the director, writers, or whatever, it's not necessarily faux pas, never do it. There is also kind of a back door to it. Like, say they wanted to do this full body something or another, and the AD was like, "Look, we're going to be running up against daylight. We do not have time. We need to figure out how to make this less because we don't have time to make an entire body dead or something." I don't know. There's
Peter
a lot
in
of
the water.
Yeah, Peter in the water.
Okay.
And we don't have time to do that. So we need to come up with a different solution. Maybe we only see part of it. You know, maybe we just see his head. Like, it's inserting yourself creatively with a solution to a different kind of problem. Again, it depends on your comfortableness with everything, but it could just be left at, we need to come up with another solution. That's it. And then they figure it out. But generally speaking, it only really comes from writers, directors, producers, and it just depends. You know, if you're talking about, you know, it could be somewhat creative of a solution, like a makeup artist will come up with a solution to something, or a VFX artist will come up with a solution because it's something that's their wheelhouse. Like, you know what, we could VFX this. That's something that we could do. It'd be much easier than whatever you've suggested. So in a way, you're suggesting something creatively, but you're not necessarily trying to be creative, you know, tell them what the story should be. You're trying to give them a solution to a problem or an easier way of doing something. You're trying to insert your expertise into the creative story, not necessarily trying to tell the story. I don't know if that answers the question.
So, yeah, it does. So it could come from whoever's actually putting the show together, whoever's planning and writing, creating the show, and then it could come from somewhere else along the way based on practicality. Mm-hmm. And that could be for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's always fun finding that. Wonder if it's picking it up.
I don't know.
Someone else in the building is cooking like I do, and the smoke alarms are going off.
I bet you they feel bad right now.
This-
Oh no!
yeah,
They don't realize that they're so sensitive. They're so sensitive.
There's an Airbnb directly beneath us, and that usually is not a problem. But the guests who came in today have just come in, and I don't believe they're from this country, so it could be a little different.
Yeah.
Either way, that's funny. What else have you got?
Well,
I liked this.
I think there's something else on your list there.
Yes, there is one more, but I don't want to completely hijack the the dictation of the
I
conversation.
mean, I think they've said, oh, we both mentioned this, it might be, but your last note on there, that Andrea just kisses Dean there in front of her kid after apparently his dad just died, like, I don't know, a few months ago or something.
That is my last note, yes.
And I was like, I guess that's one other thing that as an adult I'm viewing differently. At the time, I didn't necessarily get it as an ick factor, kind of just like, okay, another girl is kissing Dean, like, whatever. But now I'm like, in front of your child who just lost his dad? Like, what are you doing?
Wasn't his dad like 2 years ago?
Oh, was it 2 years?
I thought it was.
But clearly he's still been having issues with it.
Yeah. He's gone completely silent. So this is definitely still a weird thing.
I mean, he's in much better spirits now in that scene, but...
Sure, yeah, he's finally talking, but I do agree that it might have been a bit of a weird message, because her pushing Dean away was still obvious, and he would have picked up on that. And the reward for solving the case is
yet another
he
kiss.
gets a kiss. So this is obviously the lesson, and the kid's right there. Like, maybe if the kid grabbed the army men out of baby and run off, so that way we could just take out that one little factor. I don't know. That part felt a little weird.
Yeah, it was a little weird, especially since it's the second episode in a row where Dean gets a kiss for saving lives.
Yeah, I'm noticing that pattern too. Poor Sam.
Well, Sam,
I mean, he's not going to take them, but still, Dean's still gravitating toward getting all of the lovin's, all the kissy rewards. But I think that the other question, the other thing that it gives me, I noticed that Dean was pursuing her, like actually pursuing her at the beginning, right? And then she rejects him and he backs off. But then he starts falling for the kid. Mm-hmm. And then she actually kisses him, which is what he wanted from the beginning. But you notice as soon as that happened, he was done. He was out. He was like, all right, we're leaving now. I don't think the expression that we got from him was over-the-top elation. And it made me think, just for a split second, is he got what he wanted in the first place, but maybe this whole wanting kids, like really getting connected to a kid when it's obvious that he's never really had kids in his life before anyway. Maybe he really likes kids. Maybe he actually wants a family. Maybe he wants something real and legitimate. And then she gave him what he wanted in the first place. And then that meant he wasn't getting what he wanted in the second place.
That's extremely interesting, and I wish I could say more without spoiling things.
You have to stop with the spoiling.
I didn't!
Yes, but telling me that you're not spoiling means that you're still spoiling something.
No, because
if it's coming off of me saying, this is what I think's going to happen, you're like, oh, well, spoiler.
Well, no, but it could be the opposite.
Yeah, but there doesn't have to be anything about it.
Well, what do you want me to say?
Nothing. Don't address spoilers at all, because right now I have no idea what's coming.
You've got to know that at some point you're going to get something about Dean in relationships.
No, I don't.
15 seasons?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
It has happened plenty of times before.
No, not when...
Characters getting all of this time and no relationship whatsoever. It happens.
Yeah, but you're going to find out more about like why that is, or if he does or does not.
I'm still calling this a spoiler.
No, whatever.
Yes.
You just want to
Because it only came up as soon as I brought up a kid.
Yeah, but I'm not telling you that Dean has a kid or does not have a kid in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not.
I know that it has something to do with it now.
You've talked previously about Dean and what his relationships look like in the future. And if you think there's 15 seasons without that guy ever having an explanation about relationships in his life, either a crashing and burning or him having a legitimate relationship, you don't know me very well. Because this is 15 seasons, and you think that I would stick around if both of these boys are just like the whole time just giving one kiss at the end of an episode. Mm-hmm. Hell no.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know me very well then.
Just wait. I will be able to prove it at a later date.
Prove what?
That there can be characters that go through many, many, many seasons and have absolutely zero relationship in question.
Yeah, but Dean's already had relationships.
We don't know that.
No, but I mean, you're already seeing him have these micro relationships.
Oh, we've seen him get kisses.
Yes, micro relationship. He's trying to like get with these girls.
We got to talk about a micro relationship.
No, we don't. You're going overboard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, favorite thing from the episode.
Or
maybe we go least favorite first.
This is one of those things you think I would have thought about it because it has come up every single time so far. Least favorite was a complete and utter lack of Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Okay, so you liked the episode.
I did. I did really, really like this episode. This was good. This was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed checking the timestamp. Be like, we're 2/3 of the way through this episode. I still have no idea what this is, and it was enjoyable. That wasn't frustrating, and that what looked to me like a formula of how these episodes are going to go was so not true. It was so very different from the previous episode. And I liked that. I liked that a lot. It was very creative writing. It was creative execution. The fact that this is a character-driven show is awesome. It's awesome. It brought up another point that I was thinking about before when we were talking about this earlier about we weren't talking about this specifically, but it got me thinking about it, is whether or not this show is science fiction or fantasy. Because it plays with the fantasy world, but it does so from a scientific perspective, which I think could be a later conversation. I tend to not enjoy fantasy very much because it just kind of feels ungrounded. Like you can do whatever you want, and you can Deus Ex Machina the hell out of anything that you want to, and it can just be convenient. And this doesn't seem like they're catching into that.
No, the research team on this show, obviously these things don't actually exist, but there's still lore out there about them. And so I think that they tend to stick to what that lore is. They don't just say, you know what, all of a sudden, I don't know, Wendigos, like there's probably lore about them, right? They don't just say, you know what, let's just have the boys be able to do magic all of a sudden and get rid of.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And one of those elements is it's enjoyable. Because it keeps me closer related to the story as opposed to just holding on for dear life. Because if you're dealing with this world that you can just kind of make up whatever you want, you don't really get to rest in it. You don't get to be comfortable in it. Because they're just going to hit you upside the head in any direction over anything. And I feel like that's lazy storytelling. I've got a hot take on that, and I'm not sure if I should say it or not. I'm going to upset somebody.
Oh, you have more, or that's your hot take?
No. That's not the hot take. The hot take is that it's a Star Wars thing. Is that
oh boy,
you get to Deus Ex Machina the Jedi whenever you want. If you ever just need a really convenient plot device, just make up a new Jedi power. And so everything you knew about the Jedi before is up in question, and it's bunk, and you can just do whatever you want with the Jedi because they're magicians.
Now that being said, 15 seasons is a long time, and there are definitely some things that like you can tell later on, like, you know what, we went down the wrong road with this. We need to pivot. But I don't think it ever ruined it for me. It wasn't like, oh, now all of a sudden, whatever. Like, I don't think I ever felt that way about things.
You see those in Trek too.
A little bit, actually, because there's like some big, bad something or another that's impossible or whatever. And then later on, it's like not so impossible. Mm-hmm. But I feel like that's just kind of the nature of how things go. Like in life too, something feels impossible, but then the more you experience, the more you learn, the more whatever, it's less impossible. So I kind of give A, the leeway for it being 15 seasons, so nothing's ever going to be perfect in that way. And B, that it does reflect life in some ways. That sometimes something that is impossible in your mind when you first encounter it, later you learn a lot more and you figure out, oh, it's still hard, but it's definitely not impossible.
I think it's one of those things, too, that you have to keep in mind the kind of time pressure that these guys are on whenever they're creating these shows. Especially in this time period. I don't know exactly what the shooting schedule looked like, but I know that on the Trek side, late 80s, early 90s, they were literally having to turn over a new episode every single week. And to think about all that has to be done, and the more that we talk about your work, the more I understand that I didn't know jack shit about how much work actually had to be done to go into these shows. It is astounding. And they had to turn them over that rapidly to not make as many mistakes as they didn't.
Now, are you saying that an episode that they shot would then air the next week? Because I don't think that's what was happening.
we'll have to get our research team on this.
Because my suspicion is that it's same thing with the show that I'm working on, is that you start shooting in, say, July, and episodes start airing in September. So you have time to get episodes done, and then you get a bit of a bank to then air them every single week.
Well, and yeah, that's the part that I'm not positive about. I do believe that they were going through a 1 week mindset, like a 1 week turnaround. Now, was it publishing on day 7, or was it not publishing? You know what I'm saying? Airing. Thank you. On day 7? No, probably not. But regardless, you still only have 7 days to capture this episode, and so that either way, there's not plenty of time to do it. Well, and that's kind of my point: is how quickly they have to go do everything. And to be able to make it immaculate enough that 30 years later, 40 years later, we're still going through everything with a fine-tooth comb and pointing out every single freaking mistake. Like last week, somebody's shoe bumped the set piece and it made the wall move, and we're tearing it apart 20 years after the fact.
Yeah. PSA real quick. Everybody that's out there that thinks the Hollywood world is so glamorous and it's so intriguing and whatever, from the outside, let me just say, I'm not going to go into it because, there's a lot that I could say, but I'm going to leave you with one sentence, maybe like 2 sentences. The typical film day, your pay is based off of 12 hours. 12. So that's what they really think that you're going to work. I've worked 18-hour days, 19-hour days, 17-hour days. Nowadays, luckily, there's a 14-hour rule, so I don't usually work over 14. But, yeah. I don't know those of you out there that would love to work in anything for 17, 18 hours every day. It's grueling, and it is exhausting. I'm not trying to dog, and I'm not going to get into it right now, but I just want to put it out there, PSA, of like, when he says that it's a lot goes into it and it's hard work, it's no joke. It is very grueling at times, and it becomes your entire life in a lot of ways when you're doing it, because you don't have much time off. Most of your time off is sleeping.
I do want to dig into that. I have found that incredibly fascinating, and you and I have talked about, like, this is just me talking about my job, but I would love to spend some time digging more into that. Just what is a day in the life like this? The stuff that's super cool, the stuff that's very routine, things that someone who doesn't work in the industry would find very cool, that's very routine for you. There's so much of that I'm excited about digging into as we go through the show.
So if you want to hear more about that, leave a comment below.
Like, comment, and subscribe.
What would you like to hear about? Okay, so least favorite thing real quick.
I already did my least favorite.
What's your favorite? Sorry, your favorite.
Oh, my favorite. Top half of Peter's head just bobbing out of the water. I'm gonna have a nightmare about that tonight.
Yeah, I think that's probably my favorite thing too. And I think my least favorite part is the kiss in front of the kid. If the kid hadn't have been there, fine. The kid, it's an ick factor. And
it did feel a little ick.
Yeah,
it made me feel a little ick about Andrea making the call to do that.
Yeah, she was such a great character up until that point.
Yes,
and I think that kind of cheapened her a little bit, because she was so dedicated to being this great mom, and all of a sudden now it's totally fine to be kissing another guy who she barely knows in front of her kid, who's clearly had issues with his dad. It's a lot. But you know what? I'm gonna let it slide. It's fine, but it is my least favorite part of the episode. Next episode, though, is Phantom Traveler, I believe is what it's called.
You actually just caught me. I haven't looked it up yet.
I'm pretty sure that's correct. Phantom Traveler, yes, it is. It's an interesting one. Yeah. But I guess we will see you next week.
Yeah, sounds perfect. If there's anything, let's do that. Let's read the request real quick. If there's anything that would be interesting, or a facet of me seeing Supernatural for the first time, or this being a rewatch for you, or questions for Stephanie in the industry, we are monitoring. We do watch for comments. We do watch that kind of stuff. So I want this to be interesting and entertaining and fun, and actually hitting the points that you're interested in. So literally like and comment so we can know what you want to hear about. Because it's better than going off for an hour talking about how camera settings are done or lighting or stage or whatever if nobody really cares. If we need to stick with the show, then we can stick with the show. I just think there's a lot more to it you can dig into.
So in the meantime, remember, the driver picks the music.
Passenger shuts his cake hole.
Shotgun shuts his cake hole. Gosh, I'm working on him, guys. Don't worry about it.
We'll try again later.
Okay.
All right. Bye.